Welcome back, CanHammer fans, your source for 40k from the Great White North. As promised, we are doing a read-along of the new Imperial Armour Index for Space Marines from Forgeworld. I know these were released a while ago, but of course I was away for a couple weeks in Ireland, and when I came back, what was waiting on my desk? This index as well as the Chaos one. Now I have not ordered the Xenos one, so we won't be doing a read through of that unless somebody wants to donate me one, because I don't have any of those armies, but I do have this one and the Chaos one, and to be honest, this and the Chaos one are pretty similar because they share a lot of the same units, but I've still kept them as separate read-alongs because some of the units are different, like the big demons and stuff like that. So this is a book that's very near and dear to my heart. Ever since I got my Mastodon, I've fallen in love with large Forgeworld models, you will be seeing Forgeworld Bonanza for 40k coming up. I mean Bonanza, like bananas bonanza. So I'm looking to field a lot of these models in my games. I got the Mastodon, of course. I have the Leviathan Dreadnought, and I've purchased a bunch of other Forgeworld models, which you will see. So I definitely needed a copy of this book, and I'm glad it's here. So I'm going to present the read-through for you. So it's going to be similar to my other index read-throughs. I'll pause on every single page and talk about models that I have interest in. And so at the end of the day, if you just want to look at a particular page, you can always just freeze and pause or print screen or whatever a particular page that you want. And I'll be going, it's split up into sections, kind of vehicles, flyers, dreadnoughts, things like that. At the end of each of those sections, we'll go and look at the points, okay? So let's get started. First of all, it's a softback book, smooth, not super glossy. It's more of a brushed finish, so it's different from the indexes that you get. It's not very thick. It's a total of only 80 pages. So which is fine. I mean, there's not that many things. It does include, and with people thought that Forgeworld might get rid of all the models that they had rules for, but of which there were no models, but they have not. They've kept those all in, or a lot of them anyway. And so there are things in here that have rules that have no model. And there are other things that have rules that the models are no longer available, like the LUCIUS pod. So we'll see. But this is how it stands right now, so let's get started. So the first thing to say is there's a couple additional rules for a lot of the Forgeworld models. So the first rule is something called, and of course if you're familiar with Forgeworld, a lot of the stuff is stronger, more powerful, and more expensive versions of the normal stuff, and then it includes the things like those Titans and things like that that don't see normal play. So there are some things in here that you might never see in a game, and there are lots of things that you might see. And of course, the choice is up to organizers whether or not they allow Forgeworld at all. So yeah. So one of the new rules is called macro weapon. So a macro weapon is the Titans. The big Titans have macro weapons, and basically you can only you can't move and shoot a macro weapon unless you're a Titan, which they all are. So that first part of the rule really makes no big difference. More importantly, a macro weapon will do double damage to another Titanic or model or to a building. So that's the important part about macro weapons. And this rule, the relic rule, some things in here are called relic such and such, and so the relic rule here has been changed. Previously it says that in a Battleforged army, a single detachment cannot contain more relic units than non-relic units of the same battlefield role. So what that meant was, if you took a relic heavy support tank, you had to take at least a non-relic heavy support unit in the same detachment, which is not so bad for heavy support because they're not too expensive. But for Lord of War relics, you had to take at least one non-relic Lord of War. And there's no way of taking two Lords of War in the same detachment. You have to take three. So that literally made Lord of War relic models unplayable because you couldn't field 3 and still have an army. So there was an uproar about that, and there's feedback was given to Forgeworld, and in the FAQ release just last week, they changed it. Now this rule still applies if you want to have 2 or more relics on any slot in the same detachment. In the same slot, you need to have more non-relic units. But for Lord of Wars, they made an exception. You can just field 1 relic Lord of War in a single detachment, but you can't do 2 or more without following this rule. So that kind of brings my Mastodon back into existence, whereas before I'd have to figuring out ways of fielding a Mastodon and 2 other Lords of Wars in order to field my Mastodon. But now I can just have my Mastodon in the super heavy auxiliary detachment, and that's that. All right, so the first part is just kind of tanks. Space Marine tanks. So here's the Deimos pattern relic Predator. So it's an extra wound on top of the normal Predator, but otherwise fairly similar. And a lot of the difference between Forgeworld stuff and the non-Forgeworld stuff is really just the weapons that they have. So this comes with the Plasma Destroyer, and a Plasma Destroyer is a 36-inch heavy 2d3, so like a double plasma cannon basically, 7 -3, 2 damage, and no supercharge profile. So it's a decent plasma weapon, and this tank exists there. And of course you can replace it with any of these other weird and wonderful weapons and add stuff on. So C-Beam is basically a conversion beamer, and the Magnum Melta is basically a D3 Melta gun. That's strength 10. Yep, Infernus Cannon is the sort of it's like a double heavy flamer basically, but it's got it does 2 damage, so it's decent. It's still only 8-inch range. Yeah. So there we go. That's the Deimos Pattern Relic Predator. And you know what we'll do is we'll just look at the points as we go, so people can remember these things. So the Deimos Pattern Relic Predator is 105. And then if you add, it comes with a Plasma Destroyer. So if you add the Plasma Destroyer on, so this weapon page is really confusing. Here it is here. It's not in alphabetical order, but it's like all the sort of non-funny weapons, and then all the crazy weapons are on the second page. I don't know how they decided how to split that up, but anyway, that's what it is. So the Laser Destroyer is 60 points. So in its base form, this tank is 165 points, just as is right there. And of course it's a relic, so you will need to field at least another elite slot, which is not difficult to do. All right, let's move on. So Deimos Pattern Vindicator Laser Destroyer. So it's basically a normal Vindicator but with an extra wound, and you can use the laser volley cannon, which is this profile there. All right, and yeah, we'll actually go over the points at the end. And then this is the Infernum Pattern Razorback, which is basically the same as a normal Razorback, except that it has a multi-melta. Otherwise, it's exactly the same. So just a different way of arming your Razorback. And then they start going into the Land Raider variants now. So this is the Relic Land Raider Proteus, which has, I believe, an extra 1 or 2 wounds. But otherwise, all the Land Raider variants are basically have different weapon outputs. So this one is just equipped with 2 twin las cannons, and you can take this extra equipment called an Exploratory Augury Web, or the Heavy Armor ability. And the Augury Web says that enemy units opting to deploy using this ability, which allow them to deploy outside their normal deployment zone, may not do so within 12 inches of this Land Raider. So it kind of stops deep striking within 12 inches, which is pretty good. And then, yeah. So that's about it. And it has a bunch of different weapon options there. And the Land Raider Helios is a Land Raider that has the Helios launcher and 2 twin las cannons. And there's the Helios launcher, which is basically a 72-inch 2d6 missile. And does not require line of sight, so that's pretty decent. Strength 7, -1, 1 damage. And yep, otherwise a classic Land Raider. Land Raider Prometheus is a Land Raider that has 2 quad heavy bolters, which are heavy 12. So decent amount of sort of chaff killing there. And this one can carry 10 models. The Helios can only carry 6 models. And the Proteus can carry 10 as well. So. And this has the extra ability of ignoring cover and has this command relay. So while your army's warlord is embarked in this model, one stratagem played in a turn by the controlling player costs 1 fewer command points than normal to a minimum of 1. So that's not that helpful unless you need to do the reroll, the auto pass morale one, which costs 2. Right now, there's not a lot of things that cost more than 1 anyway. The Land Raider Achilles goes up to 19 wounds from 16, so it's a little bit harder to kill than a normal Land Raider, and it has a quad launcher and 2 twin multi-meltas. So twin multi-melta is just multi-melta with 2 shots, and this quad launcher is basically it's like the old quad mortar. So heavy 4. 8 -2, 3 damage, or 4d3 chaff killing, strength 5, no rend, 1 damage. And this can target. So yeah, it's basically a quad mortar on a Land Raider. Pretty cool. And it has a 4+ invuln. Wow. So it's got 3 more wounds and has a 4+ invuln with a 2+ armor save. This thing's going to be pretty hard to kill. Toughness 8. So that's the Land Raider Achilles. It's definitely not the Achilles heel, that's for sure. And the Sicaran. So the Sicaran is an elite slot, so notice that it's not a heavy support. It's relic, of course, like it always has been, and it's basically 3 more wounds than a Predator, which has 11 wounds, and otherwise very similar. It has this twin accelerator autocannon and some heavy bolters, which of course you can replace with las cannons. So the accelerated autocannon now is a standard autocannon in terms of being twin, so it's assault 8. Now it's not heavy 8 like an autocannon, it's assault 8, which is awesome. So you know, if this thing hits on a 3+, you can move and still hit on a 4+. You can advance as well, and then it's fairly similar to stats, 7 -1, and does 2 damage though. And it has the ability to not suffer penalty against flying units. In addition, every wound roll of 6+ increases the AP to -3. Okay, so it's a pretty decent weapon there. Yeah, otherwise it's a standard tank. It explodes and has smoke launchers. So that's decent. The Sicaran, just out of interest, we're going to look that up. I can't remember how much it was before, but the Sicaran is now 155. And then you add the twin accelerator autocannon to it, which is 75 points. 75 points plus 155 to 240, something like that. And then you add heavy bolters onto it, which are like 17 points each, so 2 of those. So we're talking heading into 200, over 200 there. If you change those to las cannons, you're going to be well over 200. So it's a little bit more than a Predator, but that's certainly a nice gun, that autocannon there. Quite versatile. When you get to strength 7, it becomes quite versatile, especially with that many shots. So this is a variant of the Relic Sicaran Venator Tank Destroyer. Same stats, except it has this neutron laser cannon, which is a heavy 3, strength 12, -4 d6, and any vehicles that take damage from it subtract 1 from their hit rolls in the next shooting phase. So that's okay. Strength 12 really doesn't make that much of a difference against vehicles. You need to really get up to 14 or 16 to be wounding most vehicles on 2s. So I'm not sure how useful this variant is, to be honest. The Relic Sikaran Punisher Assault Tank has the Punisher rotary cannon. So stolen the Punisher from guard. It's 36 range, heavy 18, and basically heavy bolter number. So strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage. That's a decent amount of firepower there. And then you can also put heavy bolters on it. So you can really be shooting a lot of strength 5 -1 shots with this tank. Rolling Thunder. So the Sikaran Punisher does not move or advance. It may reroll all failed hit rolls of 1 for the rotary cannon. Oh, that's pretty good. So it's got built-in rerolls. So that's a nice looking chaff tank there. And a heavy bolter. So let's see how much that is. Punisher rotary cannon. So the Punisher rotary cannon itself is 50 points. And this is the Punisher Assault Tank Relic. 175, so it's 225 points plus a heavy bolter, so 250 almost for this tank. That's a decent chaff killing. Yeah, decent chaff killing. Maybe not huge. Yeah, it's probably worth 1.5 assault cannon razorbacks. So there we go. Yeah, it's not too bad. But it's relic though. So okay, so that's the section there on battle armor. Here's the points for the battle armor, just in case you missed any of those. All right. Now we'll go on to the heavy armor. This is the stuff I like, the heavy armor. So these are almost all relic. I think they're all relic. So, and they're all Lords of War. So to field these, you need to field them individually or field multiple Lords of War with more non-relics. So it does limit their use a little bit, but certainly they can be used. And by and large, if I'm honest with myself, these Lord of War relic tanks are not worth the points. However, they're super fun and they're so hard to kill that it's often worth that alone, watching your opponent spam their whole army and doing very little to these. So I like them because they're large models and I like large models, as you know. So anyway, so there's a Spartan here. So Lord of War, 23 power. The Spartan is toughness 8 with 20 wounds with a 2+ save and 5+ invuln, I believe. Where does it say invuln? Okay, maybe it doesn't have an invuln. No, I guess so. The Spartan doesn't have an invuln, so that's a little bit makes it a little bit weaker. It's kind of like an extra big Land Raider, and it comes with quad las cannons on each side and a heavy bolter as standard. And of course, you can put a bunch of different things on top, and you can replace the quad las cannon with the laser destroyer. So that's the debate. So the quad las cannon is 80 points. The laser destroyer is like 75 or something like that. They're fairly similar in points, but the quad las cannon gives you 48-inch range with 4 shots. Las cannon numbers, and then the laser destroyer is shorter range and only gives you 1 shot with stronger numbers, but again, strength 12 doesn't really matter against 7 or 8 toughness. And then on a 3 to 5 you get 2d6 damage. If you roll a 6 you get 3d6 damage. So is that better than he's hitting on 2s? You probably hit with at least 3 of these las cannons. So this is probably better to have the quad las cannon rather than the laser destroyer. Yeah. Okay, and the Spartan can carry 25 models, or Terminators and jump packs taking up 2 spots, or Centurions taking up 3 spots, and cannot carry Primaris models. So there we go. And like all of these tanks, they can fall back and shoot and charge and everything on the turn. So they can shoot even if they're in combat. So like all the Lord of War tanks, that's a common ability, and also none of them suffer penalty from shooting heavy weapons. So there we go. So there's the Spartan. So the Spartan is 300 and something points, I believe. So the Spartan is 320, and then quad lasers are 80 each, so that's 160. So we're talking 420, so 500 points, and then heavy bolter or whatever else you add on to it. So it's 500 points at the minimum. So there you go. So the Typhon is that one that has the huge kind of cannon that sort of pops up the front like a giant mortar. This has 22 wounds and also no invulnerable save. And it has this DREADNOUGHT siege cannon, which used to be that massive template, but now is just a 2d6. So 24-inch heavy 2d6, strength 10, minus 5 AP, so no armor basically, and 3 damage. And it increases the 48-inch range if you don't move. So it's basically a giant heavy mortar. And yeah, and then you can bolster it with heavy bolters and stuff like that. And has all the other Lord of War rules as usual. So that's 27 power. So again, strength 10 doesn't really make a huge difference though. So it's just that it does heavy 2d6 in one single shot with 3 damage each. So that's pretty good at wiping out Terminators and squads or things like that. You're gonna get 7 or 8 shots on average, and pretty much you might even kill a knight in one shot with that. So so there you go. That's the Typhon. And how much is the Typhon? I love these big models. So the Typhon is 520. So it's the cost of the Spartan fully loaded. 520. And then you put the DREADHAMMER on, and the DREADHAMMER is it's included. So 520. So it's the same cost as a fully loaded Spartan. And it's not a transport door, nobody can go in it. So there you go. Sit at the back, don't move, and shoot things. That's kind of the theme with these tanks. Alright, the Cerberus is the same stats as the Typhon, and it comes with this neutron laser array. And the neutron laser array, heavy neutron pulse array. So there's a lot of these typos in the Forgeworld book. So here it says heavy neutron laser array, and here it says heavy neutron pulse array. So no point. So this is a 72-inch range, heavy 3, strength 14, minus 4, 3 plus D6. So guaranteed 4 damage. But likely 5, 6, or even 7 damage. And strength 14 matters because now you're doubling out strength 7 vehicles and wounding on 2s, and maybe 6 up at the most on the save. So any vehicle that suffers wounds from this weapon, and then it has that sort of shaken thing where it -1 to hit. So that if you're gonna go for high strength, that's what you got to do. If you're shooting vehicles, is you got to actually double out at least strength 7, if not strength 8. So there we are. So the Cerberus is 480, and the heavy neutron, let's see what they call it in the back here. They call it a what do they call it? Just trying to find it. Of course, it's all out of order. Heavy neutron pulse array in the back here, so the top of it is wrong and it's included. So 480 for this tank killer. Still, you're only killing one tank at a time. So okay, the Fellblade. So the Fellblade is a favorite of some people. There's the Relic Fellblade super heavy tank, 35 power. And now we're starting to get into the action. So these tanks now go up to toughness 9. So even las cannons are wounding on 4. So the difference between 8 and 9 is quite significant for anti-tank weapons, because multi-meltas are wounding you on 5s, and las cannons are wounding you on 4. So that makes a big difference. It's got more wounds, 26 wounds, 2+ armor, of course, and I believe it does not have a invuln save. No, it does not. So that's a little bit of a shocker for the old Fellblade. No invuln save. BS3 so pretty much standard here. And then the Fell Blade, of course, comes with the Fell Blade Accelerator Cannon, Demolisher Cannon, as well as some quad las cannons. So it's got a lot of weaponry, 8 las cannon shots, twin heavy bolter, the Demolisher Cannon, and the Accelerator Cannon. So let's just look at so the Demolisher Cannon is 24-inch range, heavy D3, 10 -3 D6 damage, and when shooting at 5 or more models, it changes to heavy D6. So there's a few of these type of guns in the Forgeworld books that change when you're shooting at large units, so pretty good. And then the Fellblade Accelerator Cannon has 2 modes. They're both 100-inch range. You have the HE shells and you have the AE shells. The HE shells are 2d6, 8 -3, 2 damage, and when you can re-roll that 2d6 if you're attacking a unit with 5 or more models. So this is the Chaff Killer, strength 8, -3, 2 damage each. So you're killing Marines and Terminators left, right, and center with that. And then the AE shell is just 2 shots, and it's strength 14, so it can double out strength 7 and -4 and 6 flat 6 damage. So 2 hits. So you have, if you hit twice with that vehicle is dead. The small vehicle. So that's a decent tank. 35 point power. Let's see how many points it is. So the Fellblade is 540. Quad las cannons, 2 of them, so that's 160. So 720. 720. Demolisher Cannon and the Fellblade Accelerator. So the Demolisher Cannon is probably pretty cheap, I think. Let's see. 0, yep. And then the Fellblade Accelerator Cannon is 0. Okay, so it's 700 points because the big weapons are free. So there you go, 700 points. If you think that's worthwhile or not, then go for it. It's a cool model and definitely a presence on the battlefield. Now we're getting into some of my favorites here. So the Falchion, or the Relic Falchion Super Heavy Tank Destroyer. Yeah, so I just bought one of these babies, and I'm so excited to put it together and to put it on the field. It's about the same overall cost as my Mastodon, and certainly has a different purpose. So this thing is crazy. So again, toughness 9, 26 wounds, 2+ save, and no invuln. And it comes with 2 heavy bolters, 2 quad las cannons as standard weaponry, and the twin volcano cannon, shooting at BS 3+. So check out the twin volcano cannon. So 120-inch range, heavy 2d6, strength 16. So now you're doubling out toughness 8 vehicles, which are every vehicles other than these dudes. -5 AP, so no save basically, and 2d6 damage. And you can re-roll the failed wound rolls when targeting Titanic units, which you're not probably going to need very often, but it'll save you from that one stinker. You're getting 7 or 8 shots with this at wounding on 2+ with re-rolls, no armor saves, so 5+ invulns probably most likely, and then 2d6 damage each. This thing is a knight and a titan and a tank super heavy killer, literally. And then on top of that, you got las cannons and heavy bolters. It really is a heavy killing machine. Quite exciting. Now, it doesn't come cheap, as I mentioned, so the Falchion starts at 640, and then you add quad las cannon, so that's 160, so 640, 740, 800, right? 640, yeah, 800. And then the big cannon is free. I think the twin volcano cannon is free. Thank God for that. So it's actually 800 points for this baby. Yeah, so you're going to see that on the bat rep. Once I get done, you're going to see me building and painting this bad boy. Me and Chris are hoping to do an apocalypse game. And I think that this is going to be my only chance to kill his ridiculous Eldar Titan. If I'm doing like 7 hits and 2d6 damage a shot, I think that thing will come down eventually. So yeah, that's exciting. So, and finally, my personal favorite and the thing that got me all into this resin addiction is the Mastodon, or the Relic Mastodon Super Heavy Siege Transport. So the Mastodon is basically the same as it was in 7th. It's still really hard to kill and can transport a lot of people and has some fairly heavy firepower. But of course now it can have the advantage of having the Steel Behemoth rules, so it can fall back and move and charge and shoot and everything as normal, and can shoot out of combat and everything. And it kept a lot of its little perks. So first of all, it's 44 power. It is strength, toughness 9 as the other ones, and 30 wounds with a 2+ save. So his save is pretty good. And he doesn't have an invuln, but he has this Void Shield. And the Void Shield rule is written by a 3-year-old. But what it's trying to tell you is that basically this is an invuln save, and the invuln gets worse as you get damaged. Okay? It becomes a ward save as well for mortal wounds. That's basically what that huge paragraph tells you. And it's only against shooting. So there you go. So it actually has a 5+, and then it goes to a 6+, and then at 7+, you can't really achieve that without cover. So, and you're not going to get a Mastodon at least 50% obscured in most cover. So anyway, the Mastodon comes with 2 heavy flamers, 2 las cannons, siege melter array, and Sky Reaper battery. So here we go. Sky Reaper. This is the bomb. This is what killed Magnus. 48-inch range, heavy 8, strength 7, -1. Flat 5 damage, and doesn't suffer penalty when hitting flyers. So wow, 5 straight damage to a flyer. You just heavy 8, so you get a few of those through and any flyer is dead. Awesome. And the siege melter array is basically a heavy 43 melta with strength 9, so that's pretty good. That's going to kill a lot of things too. And like before, the Mastodon can carry 40 models, which can be infantry, terminators, jump packs, and centurions take up 3 models. And it can carry 2 dreadnoughts, which take up 10 spots. And it just says dreadnought keyword, and all the dreadnoughts have dreadnought keywords, so it can even transport the Leviathan, which we're coming to. But anyway, so that's great. You stuff a couple of things if you have the points. You can stuff them in there. Now the Mastodon starts at 734 points. Yes, I know that off by heart. 734, and then you add in your las cannons, which are 50 points. You add in your 2 heavy flamers, which is 34 points in total, and then the Sky Reaper battery is 42 points. And the siege melter array is free. So actually the whole shebang comes out to 860 points. But yeah, it's obviously expensive, but you put your whole army in it and you move it up and it is impenetrable, and then your army comes out. So it's kind of fun. It's not going to win you tournaments, but it's definitely fun, and you will be seeing that because mine is already done and painted. All right, so that's the heavy armor. So here's the points again for the heavy armor. Okay, on to dreadnoughts. So the Mortis dreadnought, I think, traditionally used to be the one that can target flyers without penalty, something like that, but it doesn't seem to have any rule now that covers that. It's otherwise a fairly standard dreadnought. T7, wounds 8, 4 attacks, 3+ save, no invuln, and then it has a choice of a whole bunch of different weapons, including missile launchers and heavy plasma cannons and things like that. So it's a fairly flexible dreadnought because you can replace one or both for 2 identical weapons. So yeah, so it's kind of a gunboat, but it's not any different from a normal dreadnought. The siege dreadnought, on the other hand, is a little bit different. It has 1 higher toughness, and but still 3+ save. And this thing is interesting. So it comes with the seismic hammers and an inferno cannon and a melta gun. So it's clearly designed to kill vehicles and buildings. So it's the siege word. And the heavy flamer is pretty good. Strength 6 -1, 2 damage, auto hit. And then the hammers are 2 strength, so strength 16, strength 12, and 5 damage. -1 to hit, which is key on these guys because then they start hitting on 4s, so it's a big deal. And then usual stuff, melta guns and stuff. So yeah, so and then it has the special sundering rule for buildings. Yeah. It also has the sort of mortal wounds on charging. So on a 4+ on a charge, it does D3 mortal wounds. So it's a real kind of combat-oriented dreadnought. The Contemptor Mortis Dreadnought is basically the Mortis Dreadnought, but it's Contemptor, which means it has more wounds, so it's 10 wounds, and it shoots and hits better in shooting and combat, so 2+ all across. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as the Mortis Dreadnought, and it has a 5+ invuln. So that's basically what the Contemptor adds, and now you can also add a Karis Assault Cannon, so that's a typical Contemptor weapon, which is pretty good. It's a heavy 6, 7 -1, 1. So that's the Contemptor Mortis Dreadnought. And then you got this weird one, the Chaplain Venerable Dreadnought, which is basically a Vendread. Pretty much a standard Venerable Dreadnought, with but it has a 5+ invuln save from the Reliquarius. It has the Unyielding Ancient Thing, so the 6+ ward save, which I think all the Venerables have anyway. And then it allows you to reroll hit rolls of 1 if it has 2 combat weapons, so it doesn't actually give a typical Chaplain buff. It does buff strength, though, of friendly models if they're attacking the same thing that the Dreadnought is attacking. So that's an interesting buff, adding to the strength. Probably not a huge deal unless you're attacking with other high-strength things, but it might make a difference between wounding on 3s or 2s if you're dealing with toughness 3 or toughness 4. But probably not really worth it as a Dreadnought, to be honest. And then you've got the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought, so it's a Contemptor but with extra wounds, 2+ 2+ as usual, and it can take Chain Fists, and then it has a bunch of different weapons it can take. So the Graviton Blaster, which is an Assault 2 Grav, basically. It can take the Conversion Beamer, and the Kara's Assault Cannon, and Heavy Plasma Cannon, and this Plasma Blast Gun, which is the Assault 2 Plasma weapon. So and then it has the usual Contemptor 5+ invuln, and it can also reroll hit rolls if you have 2 melee weapons, and it has the ward save. So there we go, that's the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought. Now the Deredeo. So the Deredeo, which is also Relic, is the sort of gunboat Dreadnought. So it's 14 wounds. Ballistic skill is 2, but only has a 4+ weapon skill. It has a 5+ invuln against shooting, and in combat it has a 4+ invuln. So that's pretty cool. And then if you take this equipment called the Adamantic Pavés, it has the 6-inch 5+ invuln bubble against shooting, so that's pretty cool. And you can take the Helical Targeting Array, which gives you that +1 to hit against flyers. And then it has these weapons. So the Anvilus Autocannon, so it's a heavy 8, 8 -1, 2. And the Hellfire Plasma, which is a heavy 5, extra strong plasma. And it has the Las Cannon Battery, which is a heavy 2, extra strong Las Cannon. Then it has missile launchers, and yeah, so it's pretty strong. The weapons are decent, and it's a good gunboat Dreadnought to have. It is an elite slot, so it's easy to balance out the Relic rule there. I think the cost just might put this out of the running. So the Deredeo is $135. And then depending on your weapons, you're probably getting up to $250-ish. So it's okay. And then my personal favorite, Brother Rakil, the Relic Leviathan. So 16 power, and he is a heavy support. So if you want to balance this out, you need to take another heavy. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. The cheapest way of balancing out the Relic Leviathan is to just take a stock Devastator squad with no upgrades, so just 65 points. Of course, if you already have a Predator or something like that, then that does balance it out as well. So this guy is T8. So he's tougher than all these other dreadnoughts, and he's 14 wounds, and he has a 2+ save. So he's tougher, better save than, other than the Contemptor, better save. And he has a 4+ invuln flat, which is amazing. It is so amazing to negate 50% of all damage coming in, no matter how strong it is or how much damage it does. That is really, really good. It makes this guy so hard to kill with a 2+, 4+. T8, 14 wounds. It takes a lot to kill this guy in the games I've played with him. Now he comes stock with 2 Siege Claws, and the Siege Claws have melta guns in them. Siege Claws are your standard sort of 2x strength, so strength 16, so you're doubling toughness 8 vehicles, -3 AP and 3 damage each, and against infantry you can reroll the wound. You can substitute them to make him a siege dreadnought, so that just makes it more damage and more AP. And it has 2 heavy flamers in the chest, which is great because you can overwatch people with 2 heavy flamers. I did 7 wounds on Celestine with the overwatch of the 2 heavy flamers. And then the arms can be substituted with the loss of attack. So it starts off with 4 attacks. Every arm you replace, you lose an attack. This selection of weapons. So the Cyclonic Melta-Lance, the Storm Cannon Array, or the Grav Flux Bombard, 1 or 2 of each. I personally have gone for the Grav Flux because it's very flexible, 18-inch range, heavy D3, and it's strength 9, -5 AP, 2 damage, but against monsters, vehicles, or titans it does 5 damage. And for every 5 models in the target unit, you add D3 to the number of attacks. So this is actually good for vehicles, monsters, and titans, and good for chaff. So it's a great weapon, very flexible. The Storm Cannon Array is just an extra strong assault cannon, basically heavy 10, 7, -2, 2. So it's a great weapon. You'll be if you have 2 of them, you're shooting heavy 20. You're going to be killing chaff, but you're going to be killing chaff with the Grav Flux as well, and you can kill vehicles more reliably. And then the Cyclonic Melta-Lance is just a 2d3 Melta. Probably the least of this weapons that I like. Yeah, smoke launchers. So, and of course you put it in a LUCIUS pod to get it where it needs to go. So a Relic Leviathan is a little bit expensive, as you would imagine. It is 175, and then the Grav Flux and the claws are all 50 points each. So you're adding another 100 onto that, 275, and then you're paying for heavy flamer. So you're talking about 300 points for Dreadnought. And then you're adding in 120 points for the LUCIUS pod. So it's about 420, 430 for the whole shebang, which is a lot. But, man, it's a pretty good distraction. Yeah, I like it. Chapter approved. All right, so that's the end of the Dreadnoughts. Let's go and just recap the points on the Dreadnoughts here for people. Okay. Let's go on to the strike craft. So I'm going to skip the Landspeeder Tempest. Here's the page for Landspeeder Tempest. The Relic Javelin Attack Speeder is pretty interesting. The model is actually a 30k model. It's an elite and not a fast attack, so you have to keep that in mind because it's Relic. But it's got an extra few wounds over a normal Landspeeder, wounds 9. And it can take the Typhoon Missile Launcher, and it can take las cannons, and it moves faster. It's 15 inches, and it's -1 to hit it if you're outside of 18 inches. So it's a little bit better than just a normal Typhoon Speeder, and it's almost the same price. It's just a little bit more expensive. So the Typhoon, of course, is 50, and this Landspeeder Javelin is 103. So, 153. I think a normal speeder is about 130, 140. So it's not that much more for more mobility, harder to kill, and the same weapons. And then the built-in -1 to hit. And then if you have that in a shroud, I mean, that's pretty cool. So I might have to invest in some of those. Make your speeders -2 to hit. That's nasty. Yeah. Okay, the Xiphon Interceptor is interesting. I thought it got a bit of a boost. So it's a flyer and 7, 11 wounds, 3+ save. So typical kind of Space Marine flyer, ballistic skill 3. And it comes with 2 las cannons and this missile battery. And the missile battery is pretty decent. 60-inch range, heavy 3, 6 -2, and 3 damage. And it has all the usual supersonic and flying stuff, and it can fire the heavy weapons without penalty. So and then if it shoots other flyers, you add 1 to the hit rolls. It's hitting on 2s against other flyers, so it's a pretty good little anti-flyer or anti-anything vehicle. And the thing about it though is it's pretty cheap. It's where is it here? The Xiphon Interceptor is only 80 points base, and then you add 2 lascans to it, which is 50, so 130. And then the Xiphon missile battery is 30, so it's 160 points, which I believe is less than it's definitely less than a Storm Raven. Maybe it's probably more than a Stormhawk Interceptor or Storm Talon, but that's a pretty decent price. And it moves fast. It's 20 to 50, so it's a very fast flyer. So I quite like the Xiphon. It's pretty cheap for a Forgeworld model, and that missile battery is quite tasty, and the +1 to hit on flyers. So, and now the Storm Raven spam is a thing. Maybe we'll run a few Xiphon Interceptors. So the Storm Eagle, I'm just going to skip over. You can read it. It's kind of a middle of the road flyer. Just a little bit of a beefed up Storm Raven. Here's the ROC pattern, which comes with the missile launcher. The Fire Raptor. So the Fire Raptor is still good, and in fact, it's probably quite a powerful flyer. The only thing against spamming Fire Raptors is it's a bit expensive. Fully tooled up, they're about the same cost as a Knight. And probably easier to kill than a Knight, maybe. And it has no transport capacity. So there's pros and cons to the Fire Raptor. I like it. I just recently bought a bunch of them. So you'll be seeing those on the work in progress and on the battlefield. But we'll see how they perform. They are strength 7 and 16 wounds. So decent stats with a 3+ save and no invuln. Of course, they get the -1 to hit because they're flyers, and they move, the usual flyer, and they shoot at 3+. Now they come with the Twin Avenger Bolt Cannon and quad heavy bolters and the Hellstrike launchers, and you replace the missile launchers with las cannons. But of course, forgot about the autocannon. Twin autocannons that you can replace the quad heavy bolters with, and that was FAQ'd last week. So this quad heavy bolter can be replaced with the twin autocannon. There was quite the outcry because all these people had modeled their Fire Raptors with autocannons and they didn't see it on the data sheet, so they did correct that mistake. The Hellstrike missile launchers at least are reusable. Heavy 2, 8 -3, 3 damage, so they're decent weapons. They're 2 points cheaper than the twin las cannons, which are 9 -3 d6. So yeah, I'd probably go for the las cannons just for an extra 2 points. And the Twin Avenger Bolt Cannon is tasty. Heavy 10, 6 -2, and 2. And of course, quad heavy bolters is heavy 12. So is that better or worse than twin assault cannons? I don't know. You can decide. Yeah, it's got all the usual fire rules, and it can shoot heavies without penalty. So the Fire Raptor is a decently powerful gunship, but as you see, it's not cheap. So the Fire Raptor is 250. Then you're adding in 2 las cannons. Say so that's 2 twin las cannons. So that's 100 points. So it's 350. And then you're adding in quad heavy bolters, which are like 40 points each, 50 points each. So you're already up to 400. And then you're adding in the Twin Avenger Bolt Cannon, which I think might be free. Yeah, it's free. So you're up to 400 and something points for this, which is the same as a Knight. So, yeah, so there it is, the Fire Raptor. It is a flyer, though, so you can just stick 1 or 2 in. You don't have to worry about that too much, and it's not relic. The Cestus Assault Ram, I won't spend any time on that. Actually, Jamie has one of these, and I saw one for the first time yesterday. It's way bigger than I thought it was, but there it is. Okay, the Thunderhawk. So the new model for the Thunderhawk just came out, and I actually bought one. So I'm going to be building a Thunderhawk very soon, and this is its data sheet. So this is the equivalent of the Mastodon, but in the air. And it's very exciting. It's not as hard to kill as a Mastodon. Same stats, so toughness 9 and 10 wounds. Funnily enough, this is strength 10. The model is strength 10. I don't think I've come across anything strength 10 yet, so just notice that. Of course, in combat, it's only hitting on 6+, but it does have 8 attacks at full strength, so you'll hit something at strength 10. It has 30 wounds and only a 3+ save with no invuln, so it's definitely not as hard to kill as a Mastodon. It has a 5+ invuln, my mistake, so it is decently hard to kill. And of course, you're hitting it -1 because it's flying. It moves 20 to 50, and its transport capacity is pretty decent. 30 infantry models. Of course, jump packs and terminators take up 2 space, and it can carry bikes that take up 3 spaces. So that's awesome. So I'm making a list of Thunderhawk and Ravenwing. So you got all these bikers spilling out of this Thunderhawk, which is pretty cool. And it can transport Primaris Marines. So 15 Primaris can go in it, and if they are transported, only Primaris can go on it. So that's cool, and then it has the Thunder, so this is the gunship version, so it has the Thunderhawk heavy cannon, 4 twin heavy bolters, so 8 heavy bolters and 2 las cannons. The Thunderhawk cannon is heavy 2d6, 8 -2 d6, so it's pretty tasty. You can replace that with the laser destructor, which is a 16 heavy d3, 2d6 damage, and an additional d3 mortals. And then the las cannons, and of course heavy bolters, lots of heavy bolters. So this is an interesting rule called the Colossal Flyer. So this is to kind of simulate the fact that it's way up there in the air, and that it's super big. So basically you always add 12 inches onto your range when you're targeting it, which means short-range weapons will not be able to hit it at all. And then you obviously have -1 to hit. So that's an interesting rule. It's got the invuln, and then it can hover, all that usual stuff. And then it's a bomber too, so it has the cluster bombs, which is like every other bomber in the game. A unit you move over, you roll a number of d6. Here it tells you how many d6 for what type of model. Up to a max of 12 d6, and on the 5+, it suffers mortal wounds. So that's decent. Once per game, of course. So that's the Thunderhawk bomber, 42 power, and added it all up, and it comes out to just under 750 points. So the Thunderhawk gunship is 650, and then you add a couple of las cannons on it, 700, and then the quad bolters and things, and the Thunderhawk heavy cannon is free, so does quad bolters. So it comes out to about 750 points. There you go. It is a Lord of War, though, so it's not a flyer. So you have to take that in mind, but it's not relic. So there you go. And then the Thunderhawk Transporter is much cheaper. It's 27 power. It has less wounds, and but otherwise it's exactly the same. It has less weaponry, only with the heavy bolters and the missiles, and it can transport a lot more things, and it can transport vehicles. It can transport a Land Raider or a Spartan, and it can transport 2 Rhinos, Razorbacks, Predators, Whirlwinds, Hunters, Destroyers, Scorpiuses. So that's pretty cool that it can do that. And I think you can actually fit a Rhino in the actual model, which is pretty cool. But it can transport a freaking Spartan. That's awesome. And the model that, I don't know if anybody has it, but the Stormbird, which is, I was watching on YouTube, is maybe 50% bigger than the Thunderhawk, which is already big. Yeah, this thing's crazy. I won't go through it because there's way too many points that anybody would pay in a 2,000 point game, but here's the data sheet. Alright, so just to go over those strike craft again, here you go. Yeah, so the Stormbird is 651. Yeah, it's a lot. It's actually only 1 point more than the Thunderhawk. That's interesting. And you're adding 4 twin las cannons, so yeah, that adds up to, so it's about 800. It's probably about 900 points. Can carry 50 models and a Rhino. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It projects its voice shields as well. That's pretty cool. 4+ voice shield. Okay, let's move on. So these are the other small vehicles. I'm not going to go over most of these. You can just read them here. So the Whirlwind Scorpius is pretty good because the Scorpius launcher is 3D3 and it can shoot out of line of sight 6 -2 2. So that's pretty good. And you can shoot it twice if you don't move. So it's basically 63 6 -2 2 48-inch range. So it's a better version of the Whirlwind. Of course, there's Relic and it's Elite, so you need to balance that out. But yeah, that's pretty decent. So the new rapier carriers are here with the lasers or the quad heavy bolters. It's pretty cheap just with the quad heavy bolters. And then these tarantula guns. I don't think anybody would take these. And the Lucius. So this is the only thing that you can drop pod dreadnoughts in. All dreadnoughts, not just Forgeworld dreadnoughts. Any dreadnought can only be put in a Lucius pattern dreadnought drop pod. And the mold is broken and you cannot get these from Forgeworld anymore. In fact, I can't even find them on eBay or used. You can get them from China, but I just tried putting together one and it's impossible. It's so warped and ridiculous, like I just gave up. So anyway, Lucius pattern drop pod, here it is, which is basically a 120 point drop pod with no weapons. Otherwise the same as a drop pod. And then the Death Storm is basically a Lucius, but with the Death Storm weaponry in it. Not really worth it. Why would you do that? I have no idea. And this ridiculous fortification, here we go. I'll just let you read that. I've only seen this in terms of people using it as a display board, but it's this thing basically. Alright, so here's the points of what we just looked at on the battlefield. So the Scorpius is 175. So you see here that the rapier is only 20 points, and then you pay 10 points, so it's 40 points, and then you add the weapons to it. So it's not too bad. It's competitively priced. Okay, so this section is on Grey Knights, Inquisition, and Sisters stuff. So this is just a Grey Knight Razorback Vortimer pattern that has psi cannons on it. And this is a pattern dreadnought that has a Doom Glaive, so it has a psi cannon on one side, and you can put an incinerator in it, and it has this Doom Glaive, which is strength 9 -3 D6. So I was thinking if they don't come out with the Galatis or the Achilles Custodes rules, I could just use that as a Grey Knight dreadnought because it has a glaive, which is kind of like that spear. So it's pretty cool. And then here's a Vortimer pattern Land Raider. It basically has twin psi cannons. Here's a Grey Knights version of the Thunderhawk. Which can take psi cannons. I don't think it's a Psyker. No, and it can only transport Grey Knight stuff and Inquisition stuff. And then this is a Land Raider Prometheus, which is Inquisition. And the Repressor. So the Repressor is armed with the Heavy Flamer. And this does have Shield of Faith and has firing ports. So 6 models, and it can transport up to 10. 6 models can shoot out of it. So that's okay. And here are the points for these models. Here we go. Okay, I'm not going to go over these, maybe just a couple, but these are your Space Marine characters that still have rules, but I don't believe any of these have models. And they all are the HQs for the Forgeworld chapters. So Astral Claws, Minotaurs, Red Scorpions, stuff like that, if you like to play those alternative chapters. Here's Severin Loth. Can do 2 powers. Librarius Discipline, so he's been tamed down for sure. So, Lys Isodon, I still see people running Lys Isodon, who of course is the chapter master of the Raptors. So he's pretty good. He's 2+2+ across the board with 6 wounds and a 2+ save. And he has this gun, Malice, which is an assault 3 30-inch range, strength 5, -4 AP, doing D3 damage, ignores cover. So that's a pretty decent weapon. And he's, more importantly, if you're Raptors, he gives you the usual Chapter Master rerolled hits, and he adds 2 to his saving throw in armor, so he goes down to a 0+ armor save and cover, and he adds 1 to move, advance, charge, and fall back to Raptors infantry within 6 inches, and he can still shoot and advance, but not charge when he falls back, so he's awesome. And he still does the infiltrate thing, so him and 3 infantry units that are Raptors can set up anywhere on the battlefield at the start, at the end of any movement phase. So that is awesome. So he's still pretty good, I think. Let's see how many points he is. Let's see. So it's interesting, as I cannot find any points values for these guys. Alright, maybe we'll come to it in a second. There's a lot of these guys in there. There's almost more Forgeworld ones than normal GW ones. Hector Rex. Solomon Locke. Yep, no, there are literally no points for those guys. Oh, here we are. Here are the points for those characters. So Lys Isodon is 195 points, which is a lot. Yeah. Does not include war gear. Oh wow. Okay. So how much is his gun, Malice? It's probably included. Let's see. Yeah, it's included. 0 points. So yeah, that would be crazy. Okay, well that is Imperial Armour Index for Space Marines. So I hope you enjoyed that read along. Definitely a book I'm going to be making a lot of use of. And join us next time for the Chaos version read along. Thanks for your support and see you next time.